Hello there and welcome. Aloha. This is Botany 101 and I'm Angela Nishimoto. If you recall, last time we went into the Protista, the kingdom Protista. We talked about some members of the kingdom Protista, including the chlorophyta or the green algae, and also the chromophyta. We covered two groups in the chromophyta. We talked about the diatoms and we talked about the phaeophyceae, the brown algae, right? So today we're going to continue, okay, with Protista part 2, okay? So we're going to pick it up from there and we're going to get into the phylum Rhodophyta. And these are the red algae. As you can see from this image, some of the algae are very red in appearance, although they can range in color from yellow through purple and maybe even green, depending on how much of the phycobilin pigments are apparent in the alga, okay? So most red algae are seaweeds, okay, in warmer waters, in like subtropical and tropical waters, and also deeper waters in brown algae. In fact, in a tide pool, usually you'll see the green algae, in the shallower water, the brown algae a little deeper, in the red algae in the deepest water, okay, in a subtropical tide pool, okay. Some grow attached to rocks in the intertidal zone, okay. Others grow up to 655-foot depth in the water where hardly any light reaches them, okay, because of their pigments. And the way that the algae are distributed are due to the pigments that they have in their bodies, okay. There are few of them that are unicellular. Most of them are filamentous. Even this alga that you see here is filamentous. It's just that the filaments are so tightly packed so that they look like blades, okay? Or they may even look like branches, okay? They're like filaments. Later we'll be talking about the fungi, and the fungi have the same phenomenon, that they have filaments that are tightly packed as to look like bodies, okay? So red algae have complex life cycles, okay? They oftentimes have 3 different thallus structures. So you remember thallus? Thallus is the body of the alga, not differentiated into root, stem, and leaf like in the flowering plants or the land plants, okay? So meiosis occurs on a plant called a tetrasporophyte. Okay, here is actually showing the tetrasporophyte, this part of the generation, okay, and that actually occurs in this phase here to produce tetraspores, okay. So meiosis occurs in the tetrasporophyte to produce tetraspores, okay, and gametes or male and female sex cells are produced on separate male and female thalli. Okay, so you have a male gametophyte producing male structures, and you have a female gametophyte producing female structures. Okay, the reproductive cells are non-motile. Okay, so what they rely on is they rely on water to just carry them passively from where they are to where they ought to be. Okay. So zygotes may move from one cell to another through special tubes, okay. Anyway, so here we have the gametophytes, female and the male gametophytes. The male gametophytes producing spermatangia, the female gametophyte producing carpogonium with trichogyne. We'll talk about this a little later, okay. So what you'll have here is fusion and the production of diploid carposporophytes, okay, and carposporangia, which go into tetrasporophytes, and the life cycle continues, okay. Now one particular alga, this genus called Polysiphonia, okay, they have 3 types of thalli, like that generalized life cycle that we looked at. It's a beautiful photograph of Polysiphonia, okay. Now the male gametophyte, the female gametophyte, and the tetrasporophyte, okay. Now they all look the same. They all look similar to each other. The only differences between them are the reproductive structures, so sometimes they're hard to tell apart unless they're reproductive. Okay. They range from about 1 to 6 inches tall, finely branched. Remember that they're filamentous, right? They have these filaments that are intertwined. Okay. So the spermatangia, the male sex structures, they grow on the male gametophyte. And each of the spermatangium bears a spermatium. Okay. So a spermatium is a non-motile male gamete. Okay. It's not flagellated. The female carpogonia is produced in the female thallus, and it has a single cell with a structure called a trichogyne. Okay, it's sort of like a bottle with a long neck. Okay, and the nucleus, a female nucleus, is at the base of the carpogonia, and it acts as an egg. So here's some more structures. Okay, of the Polysiphonia. Okay, I can't identify any of them, but they're nice. Okay, so currents carry the spermatium to the trichogyne. The walls break down. Okay. The spermatium nucleus fuses with the egg nucleus that forms a diploid zygote. And towards the base of the pericarp, the zygote divides and produces carposporangia. Okay? The pericarp and the carposporangia together comprise a cystocarp. And the diploid carpospores are released and carried away, like we saw in that other drawing here. Okay? So here the carposporophyte phase. Okay? The carposporophyte producing the carpospore, which goes into the tetrasporophyte that produces a tetraspore, and the tetraspore either becomes a male or female gametophyte, okay, and then they produce spermatia, an egg, and the cycle continues. Okay. So the carpospore settles and becomes a tetrasporophyte, and that tetrasporophyte forms tetrasporangia. These sporangia are just structures that make spores. Okay, they undergo meiosis to form 4 haploid tetraspores, and these become male or female gametophytes depending on their makeup. Okay. So here is the tetrasporophyte producing the haploid tetraspore through meiosis. Okay, and depending on what gender they are, they either grow up into a female gametophyte or into the male gametophyte. So you can't really see it that well here, but the tetrasporophyte, the female gametophyte, and the male gametophyte are all isomorphic. They all look the same, except for their sexual structures, or the structures that produce a spore on them. Otherwise, the plants are very hard to tell apart. Okay, so here you have a very complicated sex life of red alga. Okay. Now, most red algae are reddish or purple in color. Okay, but they can be yellow, they can be green. Okay, and there's red and red-purple algal color is from the red and blue phycobilins. So remember the cyanobacteria? Yeah, you wouldn't have forgotten them by now. Remember that they have phycobilins in them, right? So red algae also have red and blue pigments called phycobilins. Okay? So in fact, the red algae may be derived from the cyanobacteria. Okay? The red algae have chlorophyll A. Sometimes they have chlorophyll D in the chloroplasts. Okay? And their food reserves are Floridian starch and mannitol. Okay? And very important, Some red algae produce agar. We've talked about agar before and how important it is to lab work. Okay. Okay, next we're going to talk about some edible limu. Okay. So Hawaiian people, for them, limu was part of their daily diet. It was part of their meals. It added zest to the diet, and it was a condiment that added a little extra zing to their meal. Okay, so how they would actually harvest it, they would go out to the beach after storms and just pick them from the beach, sit down on the sand, wash them in the salty water. Okay, or they might go out to the swim out to the reef and pick them from the reef, but they're very careful to pinch the algae from the reef. They don't just uproot the whole thing or take the whole coral or anything like that. They'll pinch it off knowing that the plants would regenerate. Okay, or sometimes they'd go to a local ia or a fish pond where algae grew too. You know, some the fish ate, some the people ate. Okay, so people would pick algae from different kinds of places, all right? And once they got the algae home, what they would usually do would be they would rinse them in salt water and pick out the algae they didn't want, pick out rocks and stones and bits of coral, okay? And then what they do is they take it home, rinse it in some fresh water, and then pound it in a mortar and pestle to release some of the fragrance, okay? And they would eat most limu raw, okay? And add salt to it, like maybe about a half teaspoon to a half teaspoon of salt to about a cup of limu to add more flavor to it. And then how they would eat it was they would usually get a pinch of limu and pinch it with a piece of raw fish, because Hawaiians ate most of the fish raw. They didn't really cook fish all that much. They usually preferred the fish raw. So they would lomi it, massage it between their two fingers and their thumb, and then eat it because they ate with their hands, you know? Okay? So it was an important condiment, an important source of vitamins and minerals, calcium, magnesium, iodine, okay? Also vitamins A, B, and C, okay? Another thing that's kind of important is that women were actually the limu experts in the olden days, okay? Dr. Isabel Abbott in her text actually speculated that maybe women became the limu experts because there were so many kapu that applied to their lives, that they had more limitations in their lives than men did. So it maybe forced them to explore other food sources that were outside the usual, the usual kind of agriculture and like that. So women were traditionally the limu experts. Okay, so the edible limu. Okay, so we have some greens, okay, such as what used to be called Enteromorpha species, okay, like Enteromorpha prolifera, right? So these are also known as limu ele, all right? And they call it ele, which means black or like a dark black color, was because this limu was favored when it was slightly fermented. Okay, they would pound it with a little bit of salt and leave it to ferment for a day or so. Okay, they enjoyed it that way the best. Okay, now the Enteromorpha is put into the genus Ulva, but there's also Ulva fasciata, also known as sea lettuce. Okay, so these are among the limu that people like to eat. In fact, all limu are edible except the calcareous ones, the ones that have calcium in them that make them hard, like the reef algae, reef-building algae. Okay, so Ulva fasciata is also known as limu palahalaha. Okay, and another green was Codium eduli. Okay, it was called limu babaiole. Okay, a rat's foot limu. Okay, this is also something that you can usually have at a luau. People like this limu. And it's interesting because this is a green alga that is a siphonous green alga. It's cenocytic. That means that it has, like the body or the thallus of the algae is all one cell. The body of the algae doesn't have cross walls, so you have many nuclei in the body of the algae, all in the same area, okay, all in the same body. Okay, so this is also a favorite eating alga. Okay, and then we have some reds, like Halaminia formosa, also known as Limu lepa ahina. Okay, red algae is obviously good to eat. Okay, a favorite is Asparagopsis taxiformis. Here you see it with some fish in poke. Okay, and that's a very famous limu kohu, very desirable alga. Okay, so this alga is kind of interesting because it would be seasonal, because some of its life history, it doesn't look like its other bodies. So some people say that it's seasonal, that you can collect it during some times of the year and not at others. Okay. Now we have Gracilaria coronopifolia, which is called the Limu manawea. Okay. Some people also call it ogo. Okay. So these are some of the edible algae, that edible limu that we eat even today. Okay. People still like algae, especially in the Pacific areas and in Asia. People eat a lot of algae. Okay, but Hawaiian people actually ate more different species of algae than anybody else in the Pacific. So what we're going to do now is we're going to go over to this side table and take a look at some food. Here I went and got some poke. It's going to be my lunch later on. Okay, so you can see here some fish. Here's some algae. I think it's Gratilupia. Limuhuluhuluwaena, something like that. That's what I think it is. Anyway, so you can see that I actually asked him, could you put a lot of algae in? He seemed a little like, but the limu actually makes it, you know? And there's green onions, sesame seeds. So when you actually go to a place like Foodland, you go to a place that makes poke, usually the people who make the poke, they're really good at it, you know, and they make really good poke. So sometimes I know that what some people do is they'll say, can I have that ahi limu poke, and can you put some shoyu from that other one in? And they get a little offended, you know, because it's already kind of titrated to be as delicious as you could want it to be. So I don't see any inamona or kukui nuts in here. Sometimes they put inamona inside. Okay, that's it. Okay, so here we are again. One of the things I wanted to share with you was that my parents sometimes would get ogo from friends who lived in the Kaneohe area, from Kaneohe Bay, you know. The way my mom would fix it was she would either make it with some kind of miso, vinegar, sugar, mirin sauce with it, and she would actually cook it a little bit. She would get the limu, we would pick it, you know, we would spread out newspapers, pick through the limu to get the little bits of shells and things that we didn't want with it. And then my mom would make that sauce, that miso sauce with it, and she would parboil it. She'd put it in a colander, pour some boiling water through it, and let it parboil, and then she'd mix it with the sauce. Sometimes she made a different sauce, which was more like shoyu, a little bit of mirin, a little bit of salt, green onions, and a little bit of round onions. So the way that people make their ogo or their limu, you know, people would pass it down in the family. And that's something that I haven't learned from her because, you know, since I've grown up, I don't eat that much limu, even though I like it, you know. But it's very nutritious for you, you know, very good source of iodine and other calcium and etc., you know. Anyway, so I wanted to remind you too that when you do go limu picking, please remember to leave the base of the plant. If the plant is on coral or rock substrate, pinch it. and take it. Don't rip the whole thing out, because if you rip the whole thing out, it's like pulling up a plant by its roots. It won't be able to regenerate, but if you pinch it, you know, it'll actually grow because the meristem is down lower near the base of the blade, okay? So we need to kind of think about letting them regenerate so they can kind of occupy their space, and also to keep alien species from taking over, okay? Okay, now we turn to invasive algae, okay? The bad guys, okay? So these invasive algae that we're going to talk about now are actually native algae, but they're sort of algae out of control, okay? So one of them is this green bubble algae, which is called Dictyosphera cavernosa, okay? It's especially infamous overrunning Kaneohe Bay at one point, okay? They're a hollow series of bubble cells, okay? And they're, people call it like green styrofoam, okay? Dictyosphera cavernosa. It, like the other alga, tends to bloom or grow prolifically, especially with eutrophication, where you have a lot of nutrients running into the water in the bay there, okay? Now this other one called green slimeweed, okay, is infamous from Lahaina to Kihei on Maui, okay? It's also known as Cladophora sericea, right? You have long fuzzy strands attached to coral and rock, okay? So these two can be sort of like a smothering kind of invasive alga invading in places where maybe more desirable alga might be growing, okay? And then we have alien seaweeds, okay? They're harmful in that they harm native marine life, okay? These are alien seaweeds. That means that they are not native Hawaiian seaweeds, okay? They can reduce fisheries habitat, so they can actually impact the amount of fish available in the waters, okay? They can cost millions to our economy from various ways, right? You can have loss of native seagrasses in Limu. I bet you didn't know that we had seagrasses in Hawaii, okay? They can contribute to coral overgrowth, okay? Loss of habitat for native species, okay? And loss of marine tourism. Because of course, when tourists come to Hawaii, they want to see, you know, Hawaiian species, they want to see native reefs and like that. And of course, you know, if these alien seaweeds take over, you don't get that. They tend to be very aggressive, okay? And here are some of them. So a green one is called the leather mudweed. Okay, these grow in leathery, bushy clumps. Okay, they have paddle-shaped blades, and they grow in sand or mud. Okay, they can grow in the tidal areas, in lagoon areas, in flats, in the deep. And it was first seen in 1981 off Kahe Point. See, that was 1981. And it only took a few decades for it to kind of get out of control. So these are like the monster weeds. Avrainvillia amadelpha, that's the scientific name of this particular seaweed. That's a green. Now the others are reds, okay? You have the so-called gorilla seaweed, okay? Gracilaria salicornia, so this is related to the Limu manauea, or the ogo, except that it's not. It's actually a different species, okay? So they actually have intermesh mats and clumps that they grow in, okay? They range in color from this kind of yellowish color to red to maybe purplish, okay? And they're even and coarsely branched. They were introduced in the early 70s, in the early 1970s, to Kaneohe Bay and Waikiki, and they've kind of quickly overstepped their boundaries. Now we have prickly seaweed. This is another red, even though it looks green here. Acanthophora spicifera, okay? This was first seen in 1952 in Pearl Harbor, but by 1961 it was on all the main islands, okay? Yeah, you can see the thin, pointed branches with spines. Okay, their habit is upright bushy clumps. Okay, and like all red algae, they range from yellow to green to red to purple, depending on where they're growing, and etc. Okay, then we have another alien called smothering seaweed, which forms mounds, Capophycus species. Okay, they overgrow and they kill Hawaiian corals. Okay, they were first seen in Kaneohe in the 1970s. Okay, then hookweed, Hypnea musciformis. Okay, they have hook tips on the edges of the thallus. Okay, and they grow in entangled mats, and they were introduced to Kaneohe Bay in 1974. Okay, so these different kinds of alien seaweeds are spread. Okay, they're spread by ballast water. Okay, they're also spread by hull fouling. Okay, wake and wave action, nets and traps, and dive and fishing gear, and by just human breakage, stepping on it, and fragmentation. Because you know that algae sometimes reproduce through fragmentation. Yeah? Okay? So we should be on the lookout for these seaweeds and also look to not propagate them. Okay? Okay, now we turn our attention back to our survey of the phyla of protists, and we have the phylum Euglenophyta. Okay, and these are the euglenoids of about 750 species. We have Phacus, and this looks like Phacus. See the red eye spot, and Euglena. Okay, so Euglena cells are spindle-shaped. Okay, they have no rigid cell wall. Instead, they have strips that spiral around the cell, and the strips and the plasma membrane make up a sort of flexible pellicle. Okay, and they have flagella. Okay, so a flagellum pulls the Euglena cell through water. Okay. Now, in most of 500 species of Euglena, okay, they ingest food through an organ called a gullet. Okay, but about 1/3 have chloroplasts. Okay, and they have a red eye spot near the base of the flagella. You see that red eye spot there, or red eye spot there? Okay, and that helps them to detect light. And their food reserve is a carbohydrate called paramylon. Okay, and their reproduction is due to cell division. Okay, they split lengthwise from their flagellar end. Okay, now some Euglena can actually live in the dark. Okay, since they ingest food through a gullet. All right, and some Euglena actually divide so fast and so rapidly that the chloroplasts can't keep up with them. So there are some cells that are produced that don't have any chloroplasts. Okay, just as long as they're living in an environment that has the right nutrients for it, and they can ingest some food, they can live indefinitely and keep on dividing, you know. In fact, this interesting fact about them, that they can both do photosynthesis, some can do both photosynthesis and ingest food, some ingest food, some do only photosynthesis. But because they can do both, that led to these Euglena being studied as plants in botany textbooks, and they're studied as animals in animal textbooks. Okay? Okay, now we go to the phylum Dinophyta. Okay, these are the dinoflagellates. Okay, they lend a reddish tint to the water during red tides. Okay, a red tide is what happens when you have a sudden multiplication of dinoflagellates. Okay, they have two flagella in grooves, and you can see here, this one here, one groove is around the middle of it. Okay, this one looks like a tiny little spaceship. Okay, so they have two flagella. One trails behind like a rudder, kind of directing the way that the dinoflagellate will go, and dinoflagellates are unicellular, by the way. Okay, the other one encircles the cell like a spinning motion, like a little snake spinning around in the center. Okay. So most have 2 or more chloroplasts. Okay. And the pigments that are in them include xanthophyll, chlorophyll A, and chlorophyll C2. And about 45% of the dinoflagellates are non-photosynthetic. That means they must ingest their food. Okay? So here's a look at a drawing of a dinoflagellate. Okay? Here's their one flagellum around the center, the other one hanging down, kind of steering the dinoflagellate like a rudder when it's moving through the water. Okay, here you see that it has oil as a food reserve, also starch as a food reserve, and they do not store their starch in their chloroplasts. Okay, here's the nucleus. Okay, that's just a basic body plan of a dinoflagellate. Okay, I don't see an eye spot on this, but some have an eye spot. Let's see if I can see it on this. I don't see the eye spot on, maybe that could be it. Okay, all of them have nuclei that have certain special characteristic, okay, and that the chromosomes in their nucleus are condensed and visible throughout their life. Okay, they never go into chromatin. Okay, they also have fairly large amounts of DNA. Okay, they have approximately 40 times the DNA as humans do. So we have 46 chromosomes, so that's about 50. So 50 times 40, okay, that's what, 200? Yes, the dinoflagellates have about 200 chromosomes, give or take a few. Okay, but of course, just because an organism has a lot of chromosomes doesn't make it necessarily more complex than another organism that has less chromosomes. There's actually a fern that has over 1,000 chromosomes in each of its cells. Okay, the food reserve is starch. Okay, it's stored outside the chloroplast, and they live in mostly freshwater and saltwater environments. Okay. Of course, the red tides get publicity because about 40 species produce neurotoxins. Okay, and these accumulate in shellfish. Okay, oysters, mussels, clams, scallops. Okay, approximately 2,000 people get sick from shellfish poisoning every year, and this is grave. About 15% die of it. Okay. And when these red tides happen, like you see in this water here, the fish die and they wash ashore after the red tide, leaving a mess. And organisms that feed on fish, such as pelicans, dolphins, whales, and manatees, they get poisoned too. Okay. So there are 3 types of toxins that are studied for use in chemical warfare. Okay. So half a milligram can be fatal of these dinoflagellate toxins. Okay, half a milligram. That's about the size of 2 periods at the end of a sentence. Okay, so some symptoms: tingling in the fingertips and in the lips. Remember, these are neurotoxins. The diaphragm gets paralyzed, and then that, of course, will lead to death because you need your diaphragm to be working in order to breathe. Okay. Other symptoms are unpleasant: nausea, abdominal cramps, paralysis, amnesia, hallucinations, diarrhea. Okay, all very unpleasant. And the dinoflagellates also have a role in bioluminescence. Remember what bioluminescence is? Is when you have fluorescing of living material. Okay. They also do reproduction by cell division, and sexual reproduction in the dinoflagellates is apparently rare. Okay. Now the phylum Charophyta. Okay, these are the stoneworts, and Cara is one of the genera. Okay, they live in shallow freshwater lakes and ponds, and their body plan is they have an axis of short branches and whorls, like that image you see over there on the right. Okay, their sexual reproduction is oogamous. Remember what oogamy is? When you have a small motile male gamete and you have a larger stationary female gamete, right? That's oogamy. Okay, when the two gametes are different in appearance and motility. Okay, they have a multicellular antheridia, which makes them different from the other kinds of organisms that we've seen so far. Okay, they also have other features of vegetation and reproduction, are more complex than those of other green algae. So some botanists question whether they're more related to mosses than they are to algae, okay, even though they're placed in the kingdom Protista for our purposes. Okay. Now, human and ecological relevance of the diatoms. Okay, so all algae are at the beginning of aquatic food chains. Okay, of course, diatoms are eaten by fish, or diatoms are eaten by zooplankton, which are eaten by fish. Okay, and for diatoms, up to 40% of the mass of the diatom are oils that are their storage products. Okay, and these are converted by fish to cod and other liver oils, which are rich in vitamins. Okay, they don't taste particularly good, but they're good for you, you know. Okay, so the diatoms also contributed to petroleum deposits. Okay, there's a place called the National Renewable Energy Laboratory in Golden, Colorado, that are trying to convert oil from diatoms to make clean diesel fuel, some alternative fuel sources for us. Okay. Now, diatomaceous earth is the glassy shells of diatoms. In some places on the planet, they're hundreds of feet deep, even thousands of feet deep, okay, of these microscopic, light, porous, powdery shells of diatoms. Okay. There are approximately 6 billion diatom shells per liter, okay, and the liter weighs only 1 3/4 pounds, okay. These diatom shells also have a high melting point at 3,982 degrees Fahrenheit, okay. This is leading to something, and they're insoluble in most acids. So therefore, in industrial uses, they're used for filtration, okay, sugar refining. They're used in swimming pool filters and in metal polishes, because of course they're abrasive, right? And also toothpastes, the whitening toothpaste, that kind of help to scrub your tea and your coffee stains off your teeth, your wine stains off your teeth, right? They're used for reflective paint, for highway markers and signs, car license plates. They're glass, right? So they're used in insulation of blast furnaces and boilers, because glass is a poor conductor of heat. They're used in construction panels and prefabricated housing. And for some gardeners, they're used as slug control, because they're like tiny pieces of glass. So when these slimy slugs and snails kind of slime their way across them, they end up with all these tiny little cuts on them, and they sort of ooze themselves to death. Okay? Now, other algae. Some green algae are used for food. We've already talked about ulva in Hawaii, but ulva is also eaten in Asia. Okay? There's also an alga called chlorella, which is very high in protein, and it actually has most vitamins except for vitamin C. Okay, so this is a kind of an expensive green alga because you can buy it at the health food store, and some people think it's an almost perfect food. Okay, remember we talked about space exploration and the use of chlorella as a source of oxygen and food in a spaceship, or it also is an oxygen source for nuclear submarines. Okay, it's pretty amazing. Now, algin is in ice cream, salad dressing, beer, jelly beans, latex paint, penicillin suspensions, paper, textiles, toothpaste, ceramics, and floor polish. This must be algin or an alginate. Okay. It's produced by giant kelps and other brown algae. Okay. So kelps can actually grow 1 to 2 feet every day. They can grow really fast. They're used as an emulsifier or to stabilize suspensions. Okay. So with these kelps, they actually have special boats equipped with special cutters on them to harvest the upper 3 feet of the kelps. Okay. And what the boats do is that they'll then take the cut kelp, put them in storage on the boat, and then take them into shore where they load them off into processing plants. Okay. Okay. So they have special boats for these things, which is great. Okay. Now, minerals and foods. Dried kelp has lots of iodine. Okay. Iodine can be used for goiter. Goiter is like an enlargement of the thyroid gland in your throat when the person isn't getting enough iodine. Okay. So concentrations in dried kelp can be as much as 20,000 times that of seawater, amazingly. Okay. Kelp is high in nitrogen and potassium and used as a fertilizer. You have to wash the salt out first, of course. Okay, because of course if you put salt on plants, most plants will die. Okay. In Northern Europe, it was used as a livestock feed. Okay, and in Asia, they use kelps and other seaweeds for soups, confections, meat dishes, vegetable dishes, and beverages. Okay. And there's also dulse, which is a red alga. Okay. So during the Irish Great Hunger of 1845 to 1846, dulse was used as food because they didn't have the potato at that time. And it's so popular in Maine and eastern Canada as a snack food that they call it Nova Scotia popcorn. It makes me want to try it, you know. Okay. Now, most people in Hawaii know about nori, which is also known as purple laver. Okay. It's cultured on nets or bamboo stakes in Japan. Okay, and they use it for sushi, like maki sushi. Yeah, or the regular sushi where you have that little piece of rice with a piece of fish on it and they wrap it in nori. Yeah. It's very good for you, you know. Now, Irish moss is another alga. Okay. It's a red alga, believe it or not. And it's used in bulking laxatives for cosmetics and for pharmaceuticals. And blancmange, I think that's how you pronounce it, is a dessert made from Irish moss and milk. Okay. Carrageenans from red algae are used as thickening agents in dairy products. Hunori is used for laundry starch, adhesives, paints. Okay. And then we have agar. Okay. Agar is one of the most important algal substances used by humans. Now, Gelidium especially is a source of agar, and agar is used in labs and medical institutions as a solidifier of media for bacteria. We've seen that before. We saw those bacterial plates. Remember, we saw that a few sessions ago. Okay. They add nutrients to the agar. Sometimes things like coconut endosperm. Okay. They grow plant and animal cells in it. Here's some agar in some petri dishes. Okay. So pollen grains can be grown to full-size plants on agar with enough nutrients and hormones and vitamins and minerals. They're used in orchid tissue cultures. Okay. Very important in propagating orchids. I worked at an orchid tissue culture lab once. Okay, and they're used for capsules, for drugs and supplements and vitamins. Okay, it's used in baked goods to retain moistness because, of course, agar is gelatinous, so it kind of retains moisture, so it kind of helps keep cakes moist, and is used as a base for cosmetics. Now the thing too is it has potential medicinal value. Okay, there are more than 20 seaweeds that are used for worms, to get rid of worms, to control diarrhea, that are used as cancer treatments, and that can be used for antibiotics and insecticides. Okay, so some chemical relatives of DDT are actually produced from some red algae. Okay, so these red algae produce something that's like DDT. Not just that, there are these sea hares that actually eat these algae. Okay, so some may be thinking that these sea hares may be have a way to break down the DDT-like toxins and break them down into smaller pieces, so that actually may give us not only an insecticide, but may give us a way to detoxify that insecticide if we have to. Okay. Now the phylum Oomycota, the water molds. Okay. So saprolegnia is one. All right. The cottony growths on cuts and bruises and on the eyes of sick fish. You see this kind of growth on this dead fish. Okay. And the growths on dead insects are from these water molds. Okay. They can be single-cell organisms, or they can be branching, or they can have branching thread-like hyphae. Okay. They have a cenocytic hyphae. Remember we talked about cenocytic, that means that you have a filamentous kind of structure that doesn't have cross walls in it, so you have many nuclei in the cell. Okay, so cenocytic hyphae make up a mycelium. Now motile cells are produced at various stages of the life cycle, so asexual reproduction. Okay. Cross walls form from below the tips of some hyphae. Okay, and zoospores are produced and they form new mycelia. Okay, and so here, this is actually the asexual life cycle of saprolegnia. Okay, so here you have the resting spore. Okay, a zoospore or swarmers form another resting spore. A primary zoospore, we're going in the opposite direction. Okay, and then you have the hyphae being formed from the resting spore or cyst, a young zoosporangium, and then a mature zoosporangium. So this is their vegetative life cycle or asexual life cycle. Okay. Now their sexual reproduction. Okay, they have oogonia and antheridia, so they have oogamy. Okay, they arise on side branches. They do meiosis, and the zygotes will form new mycelia. Okay, so that's pretty tight and quick. Okay, so the phylum Oomycota may be derived from brown algae. Okay, why would we say that? Okay, they have common features. They both the brown algae and the oomycetes undergo oogamy. Remember what oogamy is? A smaller motile male gamete, a larger stationary female gamete, right? It's called oogamy. Do you remember what isogamy is? Yeah, isogamy is when you have two gametes that look the same as each other, mating. Okay? They also have cellulose cell walls. Both the brown algae and the Oomycota have cellulose cell walls. They spend most of their life in the diploid state. And they have zoospores that have two flagella. Okay, so this might be interesting. So the oomycetes may be derived from brown algae. The red algae might be derived from the cyanobacteria. This is all very interesting evolutionary sort of questions. Okay, human and ecological relevance of the oomycetes. Okay, two of them cause serious plant diseases. Okay, you have Plasmopora vidicola, which is the downy mildew of grape. Okay, they complete their life cycle on grape leaves. And you can see how unattractive this grape leaf looks when it's infected. Okay, so what they do is they kill the leaves, and then if they're not stopped, they kill the vine. Okay, and in the 1800s, these oomycetes threatened the French wine industry. What happened was there were some American vine cuttings shipped to France, and they were infested or infected with these oomycetes. Okay, and they found that they could control it with something called Bordeaux mixture. Okay, what that is copper sulfate and lime mixed together. Okay, so it's the first known fungicide, first known agent knowingly used as a fungicide. And they've actually discovered it by accident. They actually first sprayed it on grape leaves to discourage thieves from stealing the grapes, you know, because spraying this fungicide on the grape leaves and the grapes made them look unattractive. Okay? Now we also have another scourge, Phytophthora infestans, which we have talked about before, the late blight of potato. In 1846, the entire Irish potato crop was wiped out in 1 week. Terribly destructive. And what they do is they produce their mycelia in leaves. Okay, so they're immune to spraying. The spray can't get to them when they're growing in the leaf. Okay? So they spray leaves with a Bordeaux mixture or some other fungicide. Okay? Before the spores germinate on the leaves. But late blight continues to be a problem even now. Okay. Okay, so that wraps up what we have to say about the protistans. Okay. Next time we'll get into the fungi. I hope you enjoyed the protista. They're an interesting bunch, aren't they? The catch-all kingdom, right? Anyway, so we'll see you next time, and aloha.